So our first speaker is Amy Boylan. Amy is the Assistant Librarian for Special Collections in Marsh's Library. Her career began in 2016 when she took up a library studentship in the National Library of Ireland. After that then, Amy spent 2.5 years as an early career librarian in Balliol College in Oxford, and she is currently completing her MA in Information and Library Studies from Aberystwyth University. Over to you, Amy. Thank you.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Yes. Oh, I can't see anyone, so I'll just assume as much. Okay. Great. Okay, thanks for that introduction, Margaret. And as Margaret said, I am currently the Assistant Librarian in Marsh's Library, and I've been here since the end of April. Before that, I spent the first month of lockdown as the early career librarian in Balliol College in Oxford. So that's, you can see the old library of Balliol College there on the left-hand side. So I went from there to Marsh's sort of towards the end of, I think it was about the 25th of April. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I was doing in Balliol at the start of lockdown, and what we've been doing in Marsh's then for the past 6.5, 7 months at this stage, and what we'll be doing kind of going forward. Okay, great. So Balliol is one of the constituent colleges of the University of Oxford, one of the oldest. And as early career librarian there, I suppose I kind of had a hybrid position whereby I was an academic librarian over in the main library and on Broad Street for about 60 or 70% of the time. And that involved acquisitions and cataloguing and teaching information literacy classes and invigilating the reading room and that kind of thing. And then the other 30 or 40% of the time, I was sort of a special collections librarian over in Balliol's second site in the converted church in St. Cross, which you can see on the right-hand side there. So that job kind of was involved answering inquiries, curating exhibitions, hosting classes, kind of facilitating workshops with students, getting them to use some of the special collections material and that kind of thing. So kind of having this hybrid job meant that when lockdown started at the end of March at the UK, there were sort of two very different challenges that we had to face. So on the one hand, when we closed up, we had to try and get access to books for the students. So this was involved a lot of liaising with colleagues in the Bodleian to get more ebook access. It also involved a lot of just ordering books and having them sent directly to students, which is, as you can imagine, is very risky because there are no marks that they belong to the library at any stage, and just kind of hoping for the best that they would send them back when the time came to it. And then the second challenge that I faced was getting an exhibition together. So I was the lead on our exhibition on the languages and scripts of Balliol Special Collections at the time. And obviously, we were planning to open at the end of April, and obviously this wasn't going to happen, certainly not kind of open the doors to St. Cross to the public. So we had to think about getting it up online in a way that was possible for us. So we were very small, a very small staff. There were sort of 4 of us, and kind of we didn't have the knowledge and skills of kind of how to put together a digital exhibition. So in the end, I just ended up putting the exhibition up on our historic collections blog. And it's had a lot of quite positive feedback, which is very nice. So this is manuscript 378, which is a book of prayers to the Virgin Mary in Ge'ez, which is the language of the ancient Ethiopic church, and it belonged at one stage to a Balliol master called Benjamin Jowett, who was the master from 1870 to 1892, and he left the college his library of books and also a couple of manuscripts. So this is teeny tiny, it's about that size, very lovely, and obviously not all bad in some ways. kind of having a digital exhibition of sorts. It meant we could include items that I'd had to veto previously. So you can kind of see in the previous image that the bookcases you see there with the LED lights are actually the display cases in St. Cross. So they're not huge. They weren't very deep, and they had sliding doors, kind of typical of architects, I think, where they wanted things to look beautiful but not necessarily be ideal for a purpose. So what putting things up digitally meant was I was able to include, for example, a Lutheran Bible from 1541 that just had these giant clasps and definitely wasn't going to get into a display case. We also had an Esther roll that obviously we were able to display the Hebrew roll, but we couldn't unroll it completely in the case. So it meant we were able to get up the entirety of that. So not all bad, I would say. Then on the 25th of April, I headed home. Just thought these images were kind of a nice bridge to bring me from Balliol back to Ireland. So on the left, you can see Cat Street in Oxford at the end of April, when you'd expect it to be very full of students and tourists. So the Bodleian is kind of off to the right-hand side, and that's Hertford College. And then on the photo on the right, you see is Terminal 3 of Heathrow on the 25th of April. So very eerie, something I know everyone has kind of experienced, but so then I got home and had to think about what I could do from home. So obviously working with special collections from home is very difficult anyway, but kind of having the double whammy of working with special collections and then also not knowing the collections at all was particularly overwhelming, I think. And I felt a bit useless at the beginning, but I'm very lucky to have a very supportive team, in particular my line manager, Sue Hemmings, and we had a few chats and were able to kind of prioritize, kind of come up with a list of priorities and things that I could be working on. So obviously with all of the internet at my disposal, I was able to get access to some of Marsh's catalogues. So for example, I was able to have a gander through the catalogues of manuscripts that was on the Internet Archive, the history of the library, and kind of a little bit of the history of the collections written by Muriel McCarthy. It was also available through the Internet Archive. So kind of getting a vague idea of what I would be dealing with when I was eventually able to come into the library. Then another of kind of the nice things of working from home was that I spent a lot of time getting to know the catalogue. So our library management system is COA, which very happily is all online. So it meant I didn't have to download any piece of software or anything like that, or deal with firewalls or anything. And I could just get started on working with the catalogue, becoming familiar with it, and making improvements. So we, I think when migration happened a few years ago, there were a few problems with the authorities, and this is kind of quite a big ongoing project. But I was kind of, you know, it was nice to be able to get to know the catalogue, but also to be able to deal with some of those sort of small nitty-gritty things that usually you'd just be too busy to be able to deal with. But to actually be fixing the metadata and kind of really making sure that everything was kind of as it should be was quite a nice opportunity to have. Then Sue as well was working away on developing hierarchies for our kind of for the display of our manuscript material. So these are some of the papers and correspondence of the first librarian, Eli Bourreau, and we were kind of coming up with ideas and a plan for how to link child and parent records and things like that. So again, these are all sort of ongoing discussions we're having and kind of projects that are ongoing, but at least it gave me something to do from home, which was very nice. Great. Then as well, obviously you can kind of be planning exhibitions and things like that from home. So something I really missed, which obviously everybody will have missed, is the interactions with scholars and academics that would kind of help with that acquisition of knowledge about the collections. But so something I kind of set about to do while I was at home was to think about kind of a fun exhibition that we could do once we reopened. So I knew there'd be certain things that we would definitely have, like Richard Knox's History of Ceylon, Hiob Ludov's History of Ethiopia, and then I was also able to find some other lovely items that contained elephants, including this the gold-tooled medical tract from the 17th century, which I really like. But so the idea was that, you know, everybody's having a tough time at the moment, and when we reopen, it would be lovely to have a kind of nice, general, broadly appealing exhibition. So we were kind of thinking about that. Then on the 8th of January, the 8th of June, we were able to come in, which was very nice. So finally, after sort of 6 weeks of working from home, I was able to get my hands on some of the books. So before Marsh's had closed at the end of March, in that sort of interim period between being open but not to the public, the team had started a stock check of the Stillingfleet collection. So this is the largest collection of books in Marsh's library. It's about 10,000 books that belonged to Edward Stillingfleet, who was the Bishop of Worcester, and that Marsh bought in 1705 to be sort of the main collection of his library that he was opening at that time. So Stillingfleet's collection was regarded as the best in England at the time, and even the Royal Librarian thought of buying it for William III. But so it's full of really interesting provenance, lots of material evidence. So it's been a really exciting collection to stock check. But sort of before we started looking at the material evidence, we hoovered all the books. You can see some nice Samo bands there on the left-hand side, post-hoovering with Conservax. And we were changing all of the ties using kind of a more appropriate color, and then just checking off the items and making sure they were there. So obviously 10,000 books takes quite a long time. And as well as checking to make sure everything's there, we have really found some incredible treasures. So for example, this copy of The Life of Philip Neri that belonged to John Donne. So there are, I think this is the 9th book belonging to John Donne that has been identified as being in the Stillingfleet collection. But the other 8 were all known. There, you know, it was noted in the catalogues and in the early 20th century ledgers. But we had no idea that this book, this copy of the Life of Philip Neri, belonged to John Donne. There was nothing to indicate it in the catalogue. So this was a real, like, ooh, wow moment. You can see Donne's signature down in the bottom right-hand side, and his motto up the top, meaning for Rachel I have lived and not for Leah. So that idea that he has lived a contemplative rather than a life of action. And Twitter really came into its own with this. The picture went up on Twitter, and an academic in the University of Birmingham who works on Donne was delighted to see this, got in contact with us, and was able to tell us sort of what markings to look out for that would help us to identify it as having been not just belonged to Donne, but that he had left some evidence of reading. So like little pencil markings that he used, and we were able to send on a few photographs. And then lots of other lovely things. So loads and loads of waste. So we've been finding lots of manuscript and printed waste. This up in the top left-hand corner there, you can see, I think it's a chant from Maccabees with lovely pen practice. And then on the right-hand side there, I really liked this doodle. So we find lots of doodles, including this one in a book of French idioms that belonged to a young woman called Dora Edwards, and she records, you can't really see the title page, but she has a whole inscription saying that this book of French idioms was bought for her by her father Thomas, and that he paid 4 shillings for it, which she thinks is a very large price for a very small book. And then I think my favorite thing we found is on the bottom right-hand corner. There's a Spanish inscription that says, "Quien no parece, perece." So that idea of they who do not appear perish, or publish or perish, as someone hit on Twitter, I think. And it's the only Spanish inscription I have found anyway, or that I know about. And it was a very lovely discovery. So then, kind of as I said, obviously, I personally have been missing the interactions with scholars and students, and kind of filling the gaps in my own knowledge with that, and just those interactions that I get a lot out of anyway, and kind of helped me. Certainly in Balliol, I found that my interactions with readers were really where I picked up an awful lot of information about the collections. So social media has really come into its own in this way. And I have to say, not being a massive user of it, I was probably a little bit skeptical of its value as a resource, but it has been absolutely incredible. So, for example, I found this piece of Spanish waste in the works of Alonso Tostado, and I put it up on Twitter, and within less than an hour, someone in Spain had identified it as an incunable printed in Sevilla in 1495. I know this Jason put up this beautiful piece of printed music from a breviary, and quite nice. Somebody sang it, which I unfortunately can't seem to embed tweets in PowerPoint. But if you want to check it out on our Twitter page, it's lovely. And kind of this idea of somebody singing a piece of music has kind of given us a lot of ideas for the possibility of exhibitions and outreach in general going forward. And yeah, the marvels of social media. We have also been involved in a lot of outreach, and this has been great. So as I was saying, we opened on the 8th of March to kind of the Marsh's team. We were able to work behind the scenes, but then we were also able to open to the public from the 30th of June. And we've kind of done a sort of blended amount of a sort of blended outreach, where we've been able to do a lot in person and also kind of some virtually. So, for example, we took part in the Festival of Curiosity in July, and we made little videos on some of our curious books, but we could also have people in. We took part in Culture Night as well, but again, we were able to have a live feed of videos. And then something that I really enjoyed, because our numbers were much lower than they would usually be at this time of year. On Saturdays in July and for most of August as well, we got out a treasure from the special collections to show off to the public, and we just had it out in the reading room under supervision, obviously. But it was very lovely for people to kind of be able to wander in and get up close and personal with, for example, our astronomical treatise from the 14th century or an Ortelius Atlas, and you could just sort of see that a lot of people came in and didn't know that we were doing this, so they kind of didn't expect to see something so special. But it was really lovely to be able to talk to people a little bit about the collections and kind of just have that kind of feedback that makes you realize that there is a point to having all of these old books, and they're not just sort of sitting there unused. And then sort of going forward for the next few months, we are obviously, like everybody, we're very aware that there will be lots of opening and closing over the next few months. Who knows how long it will take for vaccines to come through and that kind of thing. And even just how reticent people will be to come into enclosed spaces and that kind of thing. So we're using this time to think about pivoting to digitization. So this is something that has been kind of on the long finger. And this, what better time than when we are sort of closed to the public and aren't having readers in to kind of think about making this a reality. So obviously, even before we'll be doing the digitization in-house, and even before the first photograph gets taken, we have to think about, there's a huge amount to think about, kind of storage and preservation and all that sort of thing. And we're having all of those discussions at the moment and kind of coming up with policies and procedures. But it's very exciting. Sue, our technical wizard, has been working in the background, and here's an example of the processional psalm use. And this will be displayed in the catalogue, so using the 856 to link to the images, and they'll be kind of displayed in the universal viewer. This is the plan so far, and yeah, it's really exciting, very exciting. Hoping as well that we will, of course, also have readers and students in, and when possible, and kind of still be doing a lot of outreach as well. We have staff who are all very excited to be upskilled and kind of learning things like Photoshop, and yeah, so that's me finished, and thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Amy. That was fantastic, and some great images there that I have a few questions already for you for later. Now, we'd like